It's the pre-market ritual you never knew you needed. Get ready to gap and go with the Calum Trading Institute.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Gap and Go. Happy New Year to everyone. It's good to be back. And, over the last 3-4 weeks since we missed out, it's been the same story. Strong dollar, strong yields. This is prior to last night. But the narrative has always been the same. And I think everybody is waiting for maybe better clarification, obviously, coming from the Trump administration. And that's the reason why everybody has been a loser. You look at, it's not just the Philippines, though. It's not just the US and the Philippines. It's also, if you look at China, you're sitting at 330 or 340 basis points already, way below US 10-year. So from a macro perspective, we've seen volume start to die down. Nothing really coming out of the ordinary. Jason, maybe you can share your thoughts, and also include Siguro last night. Is this just a knee-jerk reaction, or the markets are just overbought? And basically, what's your thoughts on the macro for the start of the year?
I guess just to recap from what Edmund said, I think what's driving all this is that if you will notice about when did the bond yields in the US bottom out? It's when the Fed cut 50 basis points in September. Outsized cut. So the Fed already cut like 75 basis points since then. And if you look at bond yields, they have rallied like 100 basis points. So I think this is clearly like the market telling the Fed, okay, we think this is like too much, and there could be like a risk of inflation. And of course, you combine this with Trump, his policies seem to be inflationary. So all these things are being priced in by the bond market. So I have no idea where inflation will go. I don't think it's gonna be out of control. But I think the point of the market is like pricing in the uncertainty. This premium. So what's a fair price to pay given all this in the outlook,
In fact, if you transfer this Siguro to China, China, I think, made the announcement, 2 days ago about their inflation forecast, and it's deflation, right? So on one end, we always talk about the West inflating. In fact, it's being penalizing everyone, including themselves. What was the tariff from Canada? 25% on all goods. Expect that. I think that was what the next prime minister was talking about. And then on the other hand, you have your China, basically making an announcement. Look, we're slowing down. Business has been bad. Property market is still in shambles. And obviously, what's happening is that nobody really knows. I think that's the biggest question mark with how inflation is going to play out the next year or two. And the reason why I share that is because if you look at flows, even at the start of the year, all the flows have still been in the dollar. So despite all this uncertainty, I think everybody's still flocking to the dollar, waiting for more clarity before people start to move elsewhere.
I think on a global perspective, there's a dynamic talaga that is going to drive this dollar higher. Kasi US is economy is still okay, at least for now. Tapos inflation risk, Fed tightening. Tapos all over the world, everything's slowing down. Especially, I think another thing that will make the world slow down is all these tariffs. Obviously. Kasi parang it's going to affect the trade, it's going to affect your dollar income, ganyan. So this contrast, talagang akit yung dollar.
And the thing is, the US can afford higher interest rates as long as there is growth, right? And like what you said, no other country comes close to growth than the United States. Europe, wala na rin eh, right? So most of the innovation, that's the reason why if you look at the S&P 500, obviously driven by your Mag 7, Mag 8, EPS forecast for 2025 is still sitting at double digit. I think it's around 13 to 15%. So, given that's the case, it makes an understanding of why, US can afford to keep interest rates and inflation elevated because they're one of the very few countries that is still posting significant growth. And that's the reason why everybody's trying to bank on this AI team, because this AI team is expected to, jump up productivity and jump up. And obviously leading the front on the AI is the US side.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, start of the year, we've seen some moves. Maybe your big tech first during the start of the year. Then we've seen markets trying to pull back lately, consolidating some more. I think it's the same case also with regards to your semiconductor, trying to break out, but it's just still there. So, I have a question for because if I look at it from technical perspective, this actually just looks like a distribution pattern, right?
It is.
But
It is.
but I don't know also, because I assume this could also just reset higher, but on face value it looks like a distribution pattern. Your thoughts on the market?
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, it's just the dollar and against everything else. I think since last year, since Trump won, I think the narrative was the Trump tariffs, diba? And I think the market really pounced on that narrative. And recently, I think the narrative shifted towards, it used to be a universal tariff, like tariff everything, diba? But this time around, I think it shifted towards a more selective, mga very critical goods lang, and a more gradual approach, like monthly increases in tariffs. Ganun. So I think that one printed this rally high for the dollar. I mean, the expectation of a very, very strong dollar because of the tariffs has simmered a little bit. That's why you have this yung kagabi. The past weeks, diba, dollar, you see the market corrected a little bit, and also you see dollar and emerging markets really trying to print that bottom.
Yeah, we should have shown the
yeah.
flows also for this January. I think January flows 99%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. It's still in the US.
Yeah, so far.
Kasi it's double book yun eh. Kasi you have dollar, you have US dollar going up, tapos you have your capital gains in your equities. Simple lang sa Mag 7 trade, ganun na lang, diba? Passive trade on that is very easy. But
Yes.
yun nga, in differential in how much reward can you get from this point? But I think that's the question now from Mag 7. And if you're looking at mean reversions on certain value issues, syempre, if you're thinking that the dollar is peaking already, syempre you have to look at emerging markets and also the underpositioned sectors, yung mga small caps mo. So yeah, I'm still looking at that also, a rotation towards yung mga small caps. Kasi there are a lot, especially on theme space, yung mga AI, yung mga robotics. So hopefully it moves there. So yeah, so recently also yung mga recent print on the CPI and PPI, so it met the support line. So the trend is your friend. We just follow that support line. So far, parang the numbers are acceptable to the market so far because of this bounce. So we're still not sure if this is sustainable. But yeah, sticking with the strong ones.
Can I just add something? Because I think Brian said something really, really fast. Because I think Brian made a good point. Because let's say you're buying the S&P or you're buying the NYFANG, what's your upside? And I think Brian was talking about limited upside. So I agree with that statement. I think the issue is, what's the alternative, right? Do you overpay for something that is still growing, or do you start rotating into other asset classes, for example, like emerging market, that are very, very cheap, but then growth is in question, right? So I think that's the reason why flows continue to move to the US, because then you provide that level of safety. And okay, the next 7 years, instead of 10% return per annum, we're looking at 7 or 5,
Yes. Yeah.
right? I think people are still willing to make that bet rather than put it in somewhere else where I don't know what emerging market is going to look like in the next 10 years.
Agree. So what's the alternative that can compete with yung higher rates, di ba? And if you look at Nvidia also, even siya is, I think is deploying his own cash towards some of the parang mga small caps nga that what we call AI, what's this? AI agentic issues like yung mga NNOX yan, mga ganyan, di ba? Something that could benefit his products and also may growth din, I think, growth in certain areas. So maski siya mismo merong konting portfolio management approach to how he uses his cash. So yeah.
Okay, Jason, last things before we start moving to emerging market.
Is this done? Is it meron pa ba? So I guess at the end of the day, it's still all about the 10-year, diba? So I think last night oversold tapos better than expected CPI, pero I think what you guys just have to remember is that the majority of these economic data is like super backward looking. It's just oversold lang, diba? So I think the key factor pa rin is like, what Trump's gonna do, diba? I mean, one word lang, pwede magbago lahat to eh. But I think what we're really watching for, especially for emerging markets, this year is that like maybe this Trump hype is like all hype. Maybe yung MAGA is going to be disappointed. Maybe like AI, maybe slow down this year, might disappoint expectations. So I think all those are very key for what's going to happen to emerging markets going forward.
You know, the funny part is, as much as we talk about it, I don't think the market's going to be disappointed. And
yeah, just
and I understand naman where we're all coming from, right? I mean, tariffs and everything. But at the end of the day, parang, everybody's just so reliant on the US that in terms of innovation and technology, I mean, you can say that China is close to reaching their spending, because I think China last year reached around $500+ billion compared to $700 billion for the US. But in terms of trust, I put that with quotation marks, right? It's still with US tech. And I think that's where markets are going to continue to lead on. And that's the reason why whatever happens on the Trump administration, maybe in the first year, I think it's still going to be AI team, and it's still going to be your big tech team. That's the reason why Microsoft, $80 billion from $50 billion capex spending. And all these guys are cutting up jobs. Let's be clear, right? I forgot who mentioned it last time that we're cost cutting. I think it was Meta, right? Last night. But at the end of the day, in terms of capex spending, you're still seeing record high. I mean, the budgets for most of these guys, and the real application and real, return coming from those. I guess we're still going to be seeing it in the next 3 years. But again, that's the reason why I'm more positive on NYFANG than in anything else.
I mean,
and hopefully, we see some trickle down effect to some of these guys.
I have to agree. So
I think you're correct. It's more of trust. Trust. So if you compare them to China in terms of technology, the number of patents, I saw somewhere the number of patents approved on a yearly basis, nilagpasan na nila yung US. So in terms of technology,
malakas ang China eh. Di ba?
But the problem is, are you going to bring your money to China? Diba?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Diba?
Did you guys see the news last week about what China did to their own Starlink? So one of the things with Starlink is that it's slow, right? Well, it's not as fast. I think it's like 5G level for satellite, right? I forgot what it's called, but the satellite to something, I forgot what it's called. Tesla was not able to do it yet. China actually launched it 2 weeks ago. So if you just Google China, they're already at the head of 6G And 6G is supposed to be like 100
6G.
times
Yeah.
100 times faster than 5G. I should pull that out for next Gap and Go. But it's an interesting story because in terms of technology, right, even in the EV space, right? Kaya nag-surrender na lahat eh, diba? Even now 6G and AI, I think people are underestimating China.
So,
Yeah.
so my point is, if it's technology, lamang naman yung China, patas na sila. But I think there is really, right, the issue right now is your bond market. Eh. Parang may shift from all those investments from the US Treasuries. There's really no place to go, but sa yung mga NYFANG eh. Rather than, di ba, selling your bonds, tapos where do you park it? Wala eh. You really have no choice but put this in cash-rich large cap tech in the US. Eh. So meaning, hindi mo rin ibabato sa China even if you sell your bonds, but doon pa rin eh, no choice ka talaga. Ay, at
Yeah.
least passive investors.
Actually, from my perspective also, I think that what you guys have been saying about China has been like very successful. I think may nabasa ako like yung ASML before they sell 50% of their revenues, global revenues, ngayon 20% na lang. Tapos parang may bagong phone nilabas yung Huawei that's 100% ng chips gawa sa China. So actually what they're saying is that parang malapit na yung China's self-sufficiency, diba? And they still have like 1 trillion trade surplus with the US. So parang fact that
surplus.
they're so successful in those fronts, talagang aatakihin sila ng US, diba?
Yep.
So it's like,
And
ang
the
hirap.
government, speaking of phones, di ba yesterday ba I read it? Parang they're buying back, parang you can exchange your old phone for new ones. For for a discount yata. So they're meron silang mga ganun eh. Really support their industries.
No, I agree with everything being said so far. I think that's the reason why you look at China, most of these guys are sitting at single-digit PE. I mean, obviously we're transitioning now to emerging market. So we can talk more about Hong Kong and the Philippines next. But I just wanted to point out, same thing. That's the reason why China sitting at what, less than 10, 11 times PE for the HS Tech. And then you have some individual companies like Alibaba sitting at single-digit PE. All hoping that, these things might have a revival, including Tencent. I think Tencent was put into was banned from US military. There was an article during this gap down, diba? Parang binan ng US military ang Tencent. And that's the reason why you're going to see, I don't know, plenty more retaliation heading into the Trump administration. And that's the reason why I assume nobody wants to touch Hong Kong with a 10-foot pole. No, because nobody really knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years. And people are still questioning what type of, protectionism US administration is going to have with regards to US. With regards to China.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. But yeah, I guess your point. That's the reason why 981 has been sitting at new highs despite everything else being relatively weak. Okay. Now, last but not the least, Philippines. And we just came from a Malaysia trip, me and Jason. And what's the best way to describe Philippines? It's like when you go there, it's like everything's like backwardation. Now, I don't want to be mean. Obviously, what's driving Philippine economy is very different from Malaysia. And the beauty about the Philippines is that 25% coming from BPO, another 25% coming from OFW remittances is really what's buoying the economy. Which I'm sure if you look at it from Malaysia's perspective, they're very jealous of that. At the same time, you look at the gig economy, we have like 1.8 million workers as VA, which is 5%. And you look at the Malaysia, obviously they don't have that capacity. So in terms of talent, I think marami naman talent naman sa Philippines. In terms of human, except that when you look at it from what's the best way to describe it, Jason? From cost of living, from city planning to
Yeah,
how things are
but
being done. It's like
Organization.
well, of course they have their own issues as well. Pero parang I just think that all the geopolitics today, parang daming opportunities being created
yeah,
and parang wala tayong nakukuha dun. Diba? If
yeah.
you look at it, parang data center investment there is spiking. Parang they're getting a lot of business also. People who are moving out of China, mga ganyan. So parang may something's going on, diba?
Malaysia had 55 IPOs last year. Indonesia had 40 plus.
Yeah.
I think that says it all. Parang, where's the Philippines? In fact, they were showing the investment banking deals in the entire Southeast Asian region by both Japanese and Chinese. Not a single company was mentioned by the Philippines.
Yeah,
That's,
parang
I mean, the
I think
last large investment from the Philippines was GCash, Mint, diba, last year. And then previously was PLDT, but from a listed company firm, actually, voila. The only one that they talked about last a while ago was just mainly the Japanese investment in PLDT. But other than that,
yeah.
I don't know.
And like some more perspective, ito yung pinaka-glaring for me. The market cap of Malaysian stocks are actually equal to the Philippines, a little bit more, 400 billion, but their trading volume is like $700 million a day.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
A day.
So
Yeah.
market cap of companies there are the same as here.
Somewhere around 400 billion, actually almost the same. Oh.
Huh.
Parang marami na silang nagawang domestic flows eh. Domestic institutions are very active. Parang they have parang may natural flow going to the market.
Yeah,
Parang they have a lot of very big like 401k pension funds, local pension funds,
that's
a lot of
correct.
that flows into the market.
Because 20% of all, just to let Brian know, it's similar to Singapore. They have a matching system. So 23% of all wages go straight into the employee contribution fund, which is your pension. So it's forced savings.
That's it, yeah.
And that forced savings today in Malaysia, from what they said, was 1.1 trillion ringgit, which is equivalent to 13 trillion ringgit. Jason, tama no? 13 billion pesos, parang ganun.
And I guess yung domestic flows are supporting all the IPOs.
Well, at least we have a long way to go. So I mean, it's good to learn from
More
everybody.
upside, more upside.
More upside, huh?
Yeah. Parang there's this feeling na, okay, we have to do something. We're getting left behind, obviously, diba?
You can look at things half empty, half full. Okay?
Yeah, the government says, let me invest your money for you. Let me introduce this Maharlika fund, I can invest things for you. I think that's the message.
I think the important part is that it's not just in terms of investment. One of the things that they really understand is about liquidity and how important liquidity is. Because everybody thinks liquidity, what's liquidity? Liquidity is just the in out flows and whatsoever. But it's that volume, it's that velocity, right? And because it's so, what's the word for it? In depth. Tama ba yung word ko, Jason? But that even from a foreigner perspective, they can also come in because at least they also understand that entry and exit for them from an FDI perspective is also sensible. Well, in the Philippines, I mean, they don't understand that. You're buying stocks, or say you're buying company, GSIS takes a position in company. Everything is all block sale. It's not on the market. So you don't provide enough liquidity for people to participate. That's the problem. Anyway, with that being said, Philippines, some stocks sitting at 52-week lows, lower than the pandemic. I have here URC, ano yung mga kinatay? Bloomberry. Bloomberry is already new low coming from the pandemic. Parang shut down yung casino nila, no? Pag tinignan ko yung chart, eh.
Oh, how low is low, where's the pandemic low?
This is the pandemic. So some of the other companies, like especially in your property, WLCON, oh my gosh, Um, parang sarado na yung mga ano eh. When I look at the share price, parang sarado na lahat eh. And that's the thing, right?
First line.
In fact, WLCON fell 30+% last week alone. Last week alone on 75 million net foreign selling. So it fell 30+% just on 75 million net selling. Ibig sabihin, hindi pa nagsisimula yung bentahan ng mga foreigner. That's how bad it is, right? And I mean, if you look at third quarter results of WLCON, I understand naman it's horrible, right? So profitability of WLCON fell from 900 million to 600 million. So you're down 30% in terms of profits. Same store sales, I think we're down 8%, very high single digit. And that's really been the story. But it's not just WLCON, it's the entire property sector. That's the reason why over the last 2 to 3 months, Lichu and all the other CBRE Colliers all making an announcement that we're sitting at 34 months worth of inventory of condominium oversupply. Colliers nga 5 years eh. So it's that range. But let's be honest, we're all seeing it, right? Maybe we're largely seeing it in Metro Manila, and I don't think the provinces are as effective because they are first-time buyers as opposed to the Philippines, as opposed to Metro Manila, where a lot of it is for investment, pang-upay, diba? And now you're seeing an exodus and vacancy. It's scaring a lot of people. So hopefully this rebounds, and for me, it's just timing lang naman lahat yan eh, right? And at the end of the day, everything is involved with interest rates, and hopefully interest rates in the US come down. So at least there might be some reprieve for us.
Yes, on my part, I think the market's still highly efficient. So just be very careful in the bottom picking stocks.
I agree with you 100%.
I think there are some good sectors in the Philippines, yung mga power,
Power.
mga telco, diba? Things that you do every day, consume power, watch Netflix.
And for sure, Globe. I think
Yeah.
everybody's. In fact, they
Circle.
were talking about the size of the IPOs in Malaysia. It's all very small. It's like $100 million in terms of market cap, right? I think the issue really on our end is like Mint or GCash wants to IPO in the second half of this year. Asking valuation is 500 billion pesos and 90 billion pesos worth. So if you look at the size, like that's what, $1.7 billion raise for GCash for the second half of this year. I don't know how we're gonna fill it up even from a foreign perspective, but I'm just saying that those are the type of size and the deals that are being done elsewhere. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if GCash was going to be selling secondary just to get out some of the private equity. Because what are they going to do with 90 billion pesos? GCash, I think, did 11 to 13 billion pesos net profit last year. This year, it's going to be more 16, 17 billion. And that's free cash flow, right? Wala namang capex ang Mint eh. Well, we'll see. IPO of the year.
Or the only IPO this year.
Or no IPO this year. So let's see. All right. I think with that being said, I think we're really playing the patient game. That has been our narrative maybe the last few months. We've been skipping Gap&Go because it's been the same story, to be honest. All the priority for us has always been in the US. Is valuations compelling enough? In my opinion, the answer is no. Is it cheap? 100%. I think that's the reason why URC is at pandemic low, Bloomberry is at pandemic low, WLCON is at pandemic low, right? But I also thought it was also cheap during this area, right? So I always, when we talk about the markets, and this is what I always get from Jason, it's always better to be late than early, right? Unless there is panic. And so far from what we're seeing, it looks like the moves have all been rational because of how we're looking at it in terms of price and volume. If there's irrationality, obviously, that's different. But from how I'm seeing it, everything looks rational. All right. So with that, I think that's pretty much it for today's Gap and Go. And I will see you guys in a few weeks' time. Hopefully we have better predictions this year. Maybe quick one prediction. How you guys are looking at one asset class anywhere in the world? Bitcoin?
First quarter, baka gold for me. Might be gold.
Eh,
Yeah.
Pwede.
Wow. I haven't thought of the
Tanahan mo ako eh.
no, because nothing else, no?
Wala may gusto ng Bitcoin? Ako, tingin ko pocket na to eh.
Yeah, it's the same boat, I guess.
That's the reason why your Bitcoin and gold look the same, di ba? Tingin ko pocket na rin to eh.
So this is all against your
Yeah.
fiat currency, highly indebted.
Jason, anything? Brazil? Mexico?
I guess,
Wala.
Malaysia na lang.
Nako, mukhang pa ba na Malaysia? But
Parang babalik.
it's gone up a lot though. Don't get me wrong. Pag tinitignan ko, ABC.
I think parang there's a lot of companies here that are benefiting. Yung mga hyperscalers kasi are all setting up shop in Malaysia. Setting up data centers, all those things. Diba? So, one, land is very cheap. As in cheap. They are beside Singapore, diba? Which I think is a huge advantage. Diba? And number three, they have a lot of energy. So, yun. So, I think may chance they can buck the trend of emerging markets or outperform.
As much as I want to say the Philippines, I think this company is going to surprise a lot this year. And I think it's still going to do extremely well just because of the autonomous vehicles. And when I look at the autonomous vehicles, and I think we're going to be sitting at very high gross margins for this business. And I think it's going to be a high tide lifts all boats where even your semicons that supply your chips to your autonomous vehicles are also going to do very well. And yeah, but again, I understand it's still a car business and majority of the cash flow of the business is still car business, right? But I think the margins are still going to be squeezed and very tight. But at the end of the day, US is going to be US. China is going to be providing to China. And in terms of autonomous vehicles and autonomous driving, I think Tesla is going to lead the way. So I don't know what story we need to pick, but I just chose Tesla. That's maybe my initial call, but I think autonomous is still going to be very interesting for the rest of 2025. All right. So with that, guys, it's pretty much it. And I will see you guys 2 weeks from now. Have a good day, guys.
Right?
Bye-bye.